Hi, my name is Aaron Adogmas, and today I'm here to talk about the effect of background on the perception of racism. Now, before I get into my argument and all that, I want to talk a little bit about perception. So perception is defined as a way of regarding, understanding, or interpreting something, or you can kind of think about it as a mental impression. But if you want to summarize it, it's actually the way we understand something. Now, everybody has a different perception, everybody thinks uniquely, and although some may have similar perceptions on a topic, in a way they'll still be different because the details won't be the same. So everybody has different perceptions. Right here, I kind of illustrated that with this picture. You have the guy on the left, he sees 4 sticks, versus the man on the right, he sees 3 sticks. So it's just an easy way to a simple way to illustrate perception. So next I want to talk a little bit about background. I want to define it. And background is defined as a person's education, experience, and social circumstances. Now, briefly to summarize that, that's basically what somebody's been through in their life and who's in their life, the events that they've gone through. And your background is always influenced by your family and friends. Your family brings you up, and they teach you from when you were little. And your friends, they influence you. You see them every day. They're a big part of your life, and they affect the way you think as well. And of course, you have status, which status, like it can be anything: school status, your social status. You have culture, which is your nationality, where you came from, and then experience as well. As I said before, past events, they will influence your background. So how does background affect perception? Well, right here I have a little chart, and you see you have perception in the middle. It's just an easy way to summarize it. But you have all of these values in background. You have values, experiences, beliefs, notions, culture, self-concept, and they all tie together to shape how we think about something, think about a certain topic. So you can see beliefs are based off of how you were brought up, and events that happen during your lifetime contribute to how you view things. So everything that's happened to you at one point will define how you perceive something. So my argument was, how does the effect of background on perception affect racism or affect race? And I split it up into positive and negatives, and I focused more on the negatives. I felt like the effect of background on perception of race was very negative because of certain things such as racism and a false perception of race. Right here you have a man, his name is James Laffey. Somebody with a background may think, somebody who has a false perception of him may think at first sight that he's a drug dealer, but if you look again, he's actually a very good person. He's a father, a son, a youth counselor, an aspiring comedian, an author, and a rapper. So it's just, our background affects the way we perceive people, and it turns it totally negative. I also want to talk about preset behavior towards a person of color, and this was discussed a lot in the stimulus material, attitudes towards Muslim women in the West, where we're presented with a woman named Lila. She's an author, she's a Muslim woman, and she talks about what happened to her after 9/11, what happened to her race, her religion. Like the Muslim woman, she was around her community, how they were falsely perceived just because of an event that had happened. So moving on, I want to talk a little about the positive effects, and although they're not many, you can think of history as a positive effect where you can view the historian, you can learn more about the historian. So let's say, for example, you have in the Historian as a Participant, that article read by Arthur Schlesinger Jr. He says, eyewitness history must be distinguished from memoirs, which are eyewitness accounts not written from the historical viewpoint. The historian surely brings to the observation and analysis of events a perspective different from that brought by the non-historian. So he's basically saying that eyewitness historians will bring details to the table that contemporary historians will not bring. And with a background, if we look at a historian's background, we can determine whether or not their statements are true or false. So it kind of gives us an edge. A positive way is we can determine whether the history we read is true or false. But also it might be bad for at a historical point of view because the historian, the historian may have bias and may not provide the correct information. So to wrap it up really quickly, the effect of background on perception of race has more negative effects than positive effects. It's a huge cause for racism and false perception of race. And it causes a lot of problems. And I believe that before we judge somebody by just their color, we should get to know them and know what type of person they are. Thank you.
So let me ask you a couple of questions.
Go for it.
All right. So,
what information that did you need that you weren't able to locate? And how did you go about trying to find that information?
Well, I wanted to know a little bit more positive effects, and I couldn't really find any. I looked through a lot of articles, scholarship articles. Like I would go through sites run by like Stanford University and all that, and I would go look through articles and I just read them, and I couldn't find any positive effects. So it was kind of a long stretch trying to find a counter argument to my argument.
Okay. So how does so explain your level of certainty about the conclusion that you have.
Well, I'm actually, can I give like a percentage? Is that okay?
Sure.
About 85 to 90% certain about my conclusion. I believe that if we profile somebody based on our background without actually getting to know them, it can have very negative effects because people have all been in encounters where, maybe somebody of a different race has, not had such a good impact on you. But if we profile that person without actually getting to know them, it could have more problems in the future. You might just not get along with your community.
Okay. All right, Aaron.